The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, Ph.D. Welcome once again. My name is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Children's Health Defense. Today, we got a doubleheader. You don't want to miss this at all. New Jersey Department of Health Commissioner could suspend vaccine exemptions, including the religious exemption. We have attorney Julio Gomez on to discuss what's the likelihood of this happening. How did we get to this situation in New Jersey? Then after that, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Paul Héroux, talking about EMR's links to diabetes. Yes, you heard that right. Electromagnetic radiation could increase the likelihood of individuals developing diabetes. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be a fantastic hour as always. And as always, we are going to open with the news. This weekend, breaking news that Rand Paul was sponsoring a bill to end the vaccine carve-out, and voters approve of this in a Maha poll. Now, the bill is from Rand Paul in the Senate to end the vaccine carve-out. It also is already in the House with Representative Paul Gosar. In the Senate, there's the bill. It's S3853 to amend the Public Health Service Act to end the liability shield for vaccine manufacturers and for other purposes. It is S853 in the Senate. It is H4668 in the House. Now, people didn't see this last week. Maha Action, Tony Lyons, the president of Maha Action, released a poll that showed voters overwhelmingly approve of getting rid of the blanket liability shield. Here it is. Democrats, Republicans, independents, swing voters, none of them support vaccine manufacturers having a blanket immunity. So this is an electable issue. This is something that can be pushed out there to the voters no matter what your political persuasion is. So shout out to Senator Rand Paul and Representative Gosar. Representative Gosar has had this bill since the summer, and since then we formed the End the Vaccine Carve-Out Coalition. You can go to endthevaccinecarveout.com. You're going to see over 40 medical freedom groups are in support of this legislation right now. And now that it is a two-house bill in D.C., Rand Paul just gave this one a shot in the arm. No pun intended. Maybe that was the best analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. You are going to be hearing a lot more about this. It is really refreshing to see that this is popular among voters too. So definitely we're going to have much more about that. Jeffrey Tucker, founder of the Brownstone Institute, has been doing basically like a master's class on the history of vaccination. I want to read through this whole tweet from him. The vaccine industry had a bad reputation following mandates in the Civil War that resulted in another wave of injury and death. What revived its fortunes was the disease panic following the great immigration of the 1880s and 90s. And then, of course, the advent of public schooling, the purpose of which was to forge a unitary civic consciousness. It only seemed to make sense that the school require smallpox vaccination. Have to clean these peasants up, don't you know? It started, as it always does, in Massachusetts, the witch-burning state. Today is another matter. Parents are fleeing states with mandates and going where authorities respect family wishes. He tweeted this out with this New York Times headline: Kennedy allies target states to overturn vaccine mandates for school children. This is the Medical Freedom Act Coalition, 16 some odd groups that are fighting for Medical Freedom Act similar to the one Leslie Manookian passed in Idaho fairly recently. And it's interesting that they highlight Massachusetts. Massachusetts is trying to get rid of the religious exemption in the state house in Boston right now. The AAP is suing Bobby Kennedy's HHS in Massachusetts. right now. So Massachusetts, it's interesting. But shout out to Health Action Massachusetts and all the activists in Massachusetts that continue to defend religious liberty and the religious exemption in Massachusetts just beautifully and amazingly in that state. A few more headlines before we get to our first segment here. Jim O'Neill, the acting director of the CDC, is going to leave his position. This is coming as there's a shakeup in HHS that is related to, I believe, the midterm elections, and that's how the Washington Post frames it. Politico framed it that way as well too. It looks like they're going to be moving people to the forefront who have played a major role in getting rid of food dyes and cleaning up our food supply, something that is viewed as a major political win as we head into the midterms and is polling extremely, extremely well. I do have to say I'm going to miss Jim O'Neill. Jim O'Neill seemed entirely on board with the MAHA agenda, especially the vaccine agenda portion of MAHA. Something tells me we're going to be seeing a lot less of the vaccine stuff in 2026 as we're going into the election season. But, you never know. You do never know. You do never know, because here we have a clip of Ben Carson claiming that, look at this bottom quote, "We know the side effects from COVID vaccinations far exceed anything else in the last 30 years combined." So let's play this clip from Ben Carson.
For several years, we've had to put up also with a lot of lies and obfuscations that really have disrupted the public trust. And of course, I think of COVID. Here we have a situation where Dr. Fauci et al. Said, don't need to wear a mask. Then, well, you do need to wear a mask. Maybe you need to wear two masks or a mask made out, but eventually admitting that there was no science behind any of what he was saying, and telling people that, if you get the shot, you can't transmit the disease. There are no real side effects, where, of course, we know that the side effects from COVID vaccinations far exceeded anything else in the last 30 years combined. We haven't been truthful about that. It's important for us to lend our voices to that, and not to just let it be swept under the rug, as is the case in so many cases. And then I think we need to educate people.
So former HUD secretary, former neurosurgeon Ben Carson has just said that the side effects from the COVID vaccine far exceeds anything else in the last 30 years. Ben Carson's very close with the Trump administration. He was appointed to the Religious Liberty Commission that is meeting in Washington, D.C. regularly. Matter of fact, in March, they will be meeting to discuss religious liberty and healthcare. Excellent clip from Ben Carson. I have to say I'm a little surprised, happily surprised. Thank you so much to Ben Carson for making that bold, brave, and much-needed statement. And stay tuned. More stuff is going to be breaking about a COVID reckoning and about what we have to do. Mark my word, there are more things coming. Okay, that's it for the news. And with that, I'm going to bring in my first guest here, attorney Julio Gomez. Julio, thank you so much for joining us here today on CHD TV. How are you doing today?
Good, Michael. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to have you here, because what's going on in New Jersey has taken a real, I've taken real attention to it. CHD has made New Jersey a national priority for us to watch what's going on, because it looks like there was recently legislation that changed the statutes that now allows what seems to be complete control over what happens with vaccines to the Commissioner of Health in New Jersey. Please expound on this. Please let us know. Give us a little background on what happened. Let me know if I got it right, if maybe I didn't get it exactly right. Please tell us.
Sure, absolutely. Michael, I think your concern is exactly spot on. The way by which New Jersey is achieving this is slightly different. It's not actually legislation. So what happened is, in December of last year, we have what is called the Public Health Council. The Public Health Council is a body that operates within the Department of Health. Its purpose is to review the regulatory framework in New Jersey regarding health and to make recommendations for regulatory changes to the commissioner. The commissioner then can adopt or reject or modify those recommendations. So what happened in December of last year is the Public Health Council reviewed, among other regulations, the regulation that governs the religious exemption in New Jersey. They reviewed regulations that govern religious exemption in public schools, and they reviewed regulations that govern religious exemptions in child care centers, daycares throughout the state, public and private. And what the Public Health Council did is they recommended a change to the manner in which a family can request a religious exemption when they have children in child care centers. And what they did is they put more requirements on a family who is going to request a religious exemption. Previous to December, a family who wanted to request a religious exemption would simply submit a statement to either the public school or the child care center that its religious beliefs conflicted with the immunization requirements. Now, a parent in a child care center has to not only say the same thing, but they also have to support it with the statement that the practice conflicts with the tenets and practices of a recognized church or a religious denomination. And they also have to certify in writing that they are adherents or members of that established or recognized church or religious denomination, which puts the child care centers in the unique position of having to determine which recognized churches and which religious denominations will qualify for a religious exemption under the law. And we believe that's untenable. We believe it's unconstitutional. We believe that government doesn't have a right in one way or another to assess a person's religious beliefs. And we believe that the Supreme Court has made it very clear that government doesn't have a right to do that. So that was adopted in December. It went into effect on January 20th. It is basically an underhanded scheme because it was done through the regulatory process as opposed to a legislative action. New Jersey has a long history of defending religious freedom, and the state legislature tried by legislation to abolish that religious exemption back in 2019. We were all there. We were all fighting to keep that religious exemption on the books, and we won that battle politically. Well, the state apparently realizes it can't win this battle politically, and so it has decided to change the regulatory scheme to make it harder for families because it knows full well that if they were to bring this to the state legislature, it wouldn't have the votes to pass. So it's an underhanded scheme. Now, most people are not aware that this change took place. The bodies that publish regulations in New Jersey haven't caught up yet because it's only February. So it takes some time for the various websites to update the regulations. But if you go on Lexis, which is a current day-to-day publication, and the New Jersey Register, you will find that these regulations are in fact in effect and went into effect on January 20th.
So, Julio, to me, what this sounds like is it just opens a door for pre-K care and pre-Ks to deny religious exemptions if they want to. It also sounds to me like the pre-Ks don't have to do that either, because this is unless the DOH comes in and starts to do a massive audit and says, wait, where's the church? Where is the declaration? I feel like there's still wiggle room. But for those institutions that are inclined to not recognize religious liberty and don't like this in general and have their own opinions of it, they could kind of squash all religious exemptions, just about, close to just about all religious exemptions, if they wanted to. Does that sound reasonable or accurate to you?
That's totally reasonable, and it's our main concern. Yes, this gives child care centers the authority to reject religious exemptions en masse. It gives them the authority, we would argue, to revisit all of the religious exemptions in their files and to ask all of those families to come back and reassert their religious views based on the new regulation. But I think in terms of child care centers that want to respect people's rights, I think it also creates the specter that the state is watching over your back. The regulation clearly states that these things have to be done in writing. They have to be signed by the parent, and the child care center is required to receive these statements and keep them on file. So surely any licensed child care center who is concerned about maintaining their license, who is concerned about staying compliant with the law, is going to have to require that all of the parents submit a statement that is in compliance with this new regulation. And they may or may not accept that statement, but all child care centers will have to do that. And I think all child care centers are put under enormous pressure to second guess the religious statements of the families whose children are enrolled, and puts them in the awkward position of having to decide whose religious views qualify and whose religious views don't.
Julio, does this have any impact on K through 12, on any other schooling or child situations in New Jersey?
It does tangentially. So what the regulations, clearly the requirement to explain your religious views is not applicable to public schools K through 12 yet. However, that being said, the regulations require written statements, signed statements from all parents, whether they're in child care centers or not. And the regulations make it very clear that if for some reason a child receives an immunization of some kind, and the language is ambiguous in the regulation suggests that public schools could deem the religious exemption on file waived as a result of having received a vaccination, and then henceforth require that family or that child to vaccinate. So technically speaking, the regulation doesn't require public schools to demand this additional statement from the families, but it does begin to open the door for public schools to second guess religious views, to hold any future vaccination against the family, against their religious views, and to document all of this and keep a very strict file for all the families that have expressed a religious conflict with vaccination. So I think it's beginning to open the door. I think they're testing the waters. I think it's a matter of time before this kind of regulation is applied to all schools in New Jersey. We don't know where the governor stands yet on this. We haven't had any opportunity to gauge Mickey Sherrill's actions or views on this subject, so that's an unknown. But I think it is a shot across the bow of anyone who wants religious freedom in New Jersey.
Yeah, you bring up Mickey Sherrill, new governor in New Jersey. The Department of Health reports to her, though. So the Department of Health is doing this. It does give me a little bit of a clue to where she might sit on this. Julio, what can people do? People in New Jersey right now, what can be done? What should they be doing? When it goes into the regulatory process, as you pointed out at the beginning of this, that really takes it out of the democratic process. It puts it into a space of, appointed science health experts and out of the hands of those who are held accountable by those electing them. So what do you think people should do? What can they do right now?
Well, I think families who are enrolled in child care centers need to go back and review whatever documentation they've submitted to the child care center. They need to think about how they would react if the child care center were to require them to supplement those statements, what they would say in those statements, how they could be more specific with respect to their religious views if they choose to do that. Alternatively, I think they should consider consulting with an attorney and finding out what their rights are with respect to challenging this kind of a regulation. Another step that parents should be taking, especially those who are about to enroll their children in child care centers or daycares in the state and don't have a record, is how they will respond to requests by the child care center for any kind of statement that complies with the new regulation. Certainly, everyone in New Jersey should be reviewing the regulation, understanding what it requires, and then being prepared and capable of meeting those requirements if they choose to, or challenging them in court.
Last question. So assuming this is the creep, that we've seen in so many other situations. The camel's nose getting under the tent to try to open it all the way up. Beyond just those who have children in daycare centers, pre-K and such, what should New Jerseyans in general across the board who respect religious liberty, who have children that are not vaccinated and have religious exemptions in schools, what do you think they should be doing in general now in 2026 and moving forward to protect their rights and to prepare for whatever is to come if this is a sign of more to come?
Well, I think all families in New Jersey who have a religious exemption, who rely on religious exemptions for their children and for themselves. Certainly, one of the silver linings of the entire COVID pandemic is that it woke adults up to the necessity of a religious exemption. I think all of these families need to talk to one another. They need to share the regulation with each other. They need to discuss it. They need to organize, and then they need to mobilize. They need to contact the Department of Health. They need to contact Mickey Sherrill's office. They need to make their views known. They need to remind Trenton of the mass that went out there in 2019 to protest this kind of a move. And they need to let Trenton know that if this move continues or if it is not reversed, then at the ballot box, there will be change. So the most important thing is for families to educate themselves, to be prepared to meet the regulation head on, and to mobilize politically to make sure that this does not remain New Jersey's regulatory framework.
Fantastic. Julio Gomez, thank you so much for joining us and for educating our audience on what's happening in New Jersey. I hope to have you back again with updates because that was a remarkable presentation. I am in a much better place myself. I'm a New Yorker. We lost the religious exemption here, so we are always looking to New Jersey and definitely crossing the border at times when we need to support our brothers and sisters there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Michael, and for all the good work that Ph.D. does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Julio brought up some great points, the importance of a religious exemption for adults. I was a New York City public school teacher fired for not getting the COVID shot. My religious exemption was denied, and literally had New York City's attorneys say to me, well, since the Pope recommends vaccination and the Dalai Lama is himself vaccinated, Mr. Kane needs to be vaccinated because I grew up in a home of Buddhism and Catholicism. And this is a similar thing we're seeing in New Jersey, what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you accountable to your religious beliefs in pen and paper and in other institutions and in books you didn't write, and not in your own heart and not with your own connection with your higher power. So important what's happening in New Jersey right now. Don't go anywhere. We have our second segment coming up right now, where we're going to go into, does EMR, electromagnetic radiation, have a connection to diabetes? And we are bringing on Dr. Paul Héroux to discuss this. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on CHD TV today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
So before we get into it, just give us a little bit of your background and how you came into investigating the impacts of EMR.
Well, I was originally trained as a physicist, but then I was asked to work on electrical burns by the power industry, assessing the electrical characteristics of biological tissues. And I was also asked by the telecom companies, Nortel, in fact, that dates a bit, to assess the health impacts of radiofrequency radiation. Ultimately, I ended at the Faculty of Medicine at McGill University teaching about the health impacts of electromagnetic radiation. And currently, I am vice chair of ICBE-EMF, which is the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields, which is a group of scientists who are specialists in the interaction between fields and health.
That's fantastic. So clearly you are a recognized expert to be able to speak on this. So diabetes and the connection from EMR, there is a study published that talks about this connection, building the gulf of opinions on the health and biological effects of electromagnetic radiation. Talk to us about this study. Talk to us about what you found.
Oh, this is really rather a historical paper that explains how the opinions on the health effects of electromagnetic fields can diverge so much between the opinions of industry and the opinions of scientists generally. And since industry has enormous influence in the world, it can really have a lot of clout in convincing politicians that their point of view is the correct one, which really leaves science on the back burner. And this is a bit sad, but in that article, a variety of events are used to illustrate how this can happen, because people might be curious about how these questions get resolved behind the scenes.
When did you first come to suspect that EMR would have an impact on diabetes?
Well, actually, I knew that in 2010. And you're going to ask me, why are you here in 2026, I believe it is,
Yes, it is.
finally ringing the bell on this? Well, scientists are slow, and you can have many indications that things are connected, but you can't be entirely sure. There is a huge literature and a huge industry that deals with diabetes currently, and they don't relate it really to electromagnetic radiation. So when are you triggered to really put everything on the line and come out on Ph.D. and give your first public interview that links these two things? And you have to look at this through a historical lens, in the sense that initially, the interactions between fields and health were related to cancer. But in fact, in my opinion, there are many other diseases that could be involved with electromagnetic radiation. And we've been changing our environment in relation to electromagnetic radiation so quickly that we haven't had time to catch up with the true biological effects. Now, if you want, I can take you through the main elements of the paper that is titled Power Systems, Telecommunications and Diabetes. Would you like that?
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Please do.
Initially, there was electrification in society. You know, in the 20th century, electricity was used everywhere, and the electrical industry was very good in taking care of the acute or short-term effects of electricity. But the chronic effects were not on the table until 1979, when Wertheimer and Leeper at University of Colorado linked magnetic fields at low frequencies, the fields of power lines, to childhood leukemia. And after 1979, scientists did their job remarkably well. In 1980, Sanders, Schaefer, and Joines at Duke University published an article that linked microwave energy and metabolism of the rat brain. Basically, they said microwave exposure inhibits mitochondrial electron transport chain function. So that was already a major part of the puzzle. In 1981, the Somikina Kiselev in Moscow linked the effect of magnetic fields at low frequencies to protons. So you had already the core ingredients of solving the problem of, I would say, interaction with metabolism and diabetes. But then what happened is that interests like the US Navy and the IEEE took control of the safety determinations based entirely on short-term heating or on short-term effects. In other words, they did not want to get involved in the question of long-term effects of radiation. So basically, they funded work on thermal effects in relation to radio frequency radiation. They screened the literature retained for reviews, and they captured the risk assessment process, and they promoted their views because, after all, the IEEE has 400 400,000 members throughout the world. They promoted their views with politicians and the public. Now, they use false arguments to support their views. They say, well, this radiation is non-ionizing, so consequently, it can't be dangerous. But in fact, the body is permanently ionized. So this argument is completely moot. And then they said, this radiation is too weak to heat up molecules as they do in a microwave oven. But in fact, the targets are not the molecules. They are the electrons and the protons that are inevitable in living systems. And so industry went on to design standards of exposure that have averaging times of 6 or 30 minutes, average time over space of 1 to 10 grams. Those are signs of not going into biology at all, because these parameters ignore biology generally. And you know that exposures to the head are 20 times higher than to the body. And this was done by industry to accommodate the commercialization of cell phones. And in 1992, ICNIRP, which is International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, was installed by industry to maintain their restricted view of electromagnetic radiation acts on people only through heat. And of course, ICNIRP got the support of the World Health Organization that I'm sure you're well aware of. Now, our experiments in my laboratory brought diabetes to the forefront. In 2013, we published a paper when we realized that magnetic fields at low frequencies are an agonist of metformin. So an agonist means that it acts in the same way as metformin. But metformin is a first-line drug for the treatment of diabetes. It's also an antagonist to resistin, and we also showed that it acted on AMPK, which is a central actor in the genesis of diabetes. So what this meant, obviously, was this aspect of interaction with metabolism, and possibly, in my opinion, at the time, diabetes was being entirely ignored. Now, what happened also that's very important is that we had an evolution of electromagnetic radiation in the environment to digital forms. And in industry, this is known as frequency domain multiple access and time domain multiple access. Basically, it means that communication is through digital packets as opposed to analog packets. Now, this new form of radiation is much more hostile to living systems. Now, the article goes on also to talk about the details on diabetes and how the action of the fields are capable of changing pH in certain compartments of the body, specifically the intracellular fluids, where insulin means glucose transporter 4 receptor, which means essentially when you're exposed to electromagnetic fields, there is a disturbance in the relation between insulin and GLUT4. So there are interactions between pH reduction, ATP production, and reactive oxygen production. Now, there's also dynamics, meaning that body systems function and react on time scales that are different from those of the radiation that we have in the environment. Now, this radiation is very, very fast, and the body simply cannot adapt, although it tries to this radiation. Now, basically, what triggered me to come out on this subject was what you would call ecological epidemiology. This is epidemiology that's not done at the very detailed level. It's done at the level of nations. And if you look at the consumption, electrical consumption, power electrical consumption of the United States, and how it was disturbed during the oil embargo in 1973-1974, you can see corresponding perturbations in the rate of diabetes in the population. And the same thing is seen in terms of the expansion of cellular systems when Bill Clinton allowed for the rapid expansion of cellular towers, you see a slight rise in the rate of diabetes. So all of this is very, very important. Why? Because you could get rid of some diabetes, large parts of it possibly, at no cost, because all of these exposures from ELF and from RF are engineering circumstances that relate to how you lay things down, how you configure systems. So diabetes is currently very, very expensive in the sense that if we could reduce diabetes by 50%, we would save about $343 million annually in the United States. This is very nice because not only are people not sick, but you don't have to pay for their care, and they become productive members of the workforce. If it was even 10% of diabetes, it would still be $70 million a year that you would save. So all you need to do is intelligent redesign of these systems, of power systems, and of telecommunication systems in order to gain these benefits and to reduce diabetes in the population. Now, I am a bit embarrassed by the fact that, after all, from 2010, when I knew that this was a possibility, to 2022, when I wrote this article, where is the delay here? Well, it takes from 2022 to today. That's the time that it takes to get this information published, believe it or not. In science, things are a little bit slow. Now, there's a number of things that you can do that don't cost any money in power systems and in telecommunication systems, particularly wireless, in order to alleviate this problem. Why not do it?
Doctor, that was I was a lot. That was amazing. I want one clarifying question on this, though. I think it's obvious, but I just want to make sure for our audience. Obviously, you are not saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that EMR causes diabetes. I think what you are saying, that EMR is a factor in increasing the prevalence of diabetes. Why don't you just speak to that nuance?
This connection between electromagnetic radiation and diabetes, although it has been underlying in the scientific literature since at least 1931, will be fought tooth and nail by conventional medicine, because people in medical school are told about sugar, they're told about all sorts of factors, and this is sort of a new I would say, a new way of looking at diabetes. So I am not naive. I do not think that diabetes is only connected with electromagnetic radiation, but if you look at the historical curves, you are really tempted to believe that electromagnetic radiation is a significant factor. Now, electromagnetic radiation produces both initiation and promotion actions, in the sense that, as you know, electromagnetic radiation produces reactive oxygen species. Many other chemicals do this, and many other chemicals are also promoters. So no, I am not claiming that diabetes is entirely caused, but what I am telling you is that if you don't rein in, or if you don't design better power systems and telecommunication systems, you will pay in health, and you will pay with your national budget.
Dr. Héroux, you most certainly are taking on a behemoth here with this, for sure. As you said, there's a lot of power structures out there that are not going to want to hear this, that are going to want to just push this away and send it back. But
don't you have currently a very courageous secretary?
We certainly do. And and that is in our favor right now. But even within those hallowed halls in D.C., there are people working with him and working against him and working all different types of things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to do. But there is no question that reforms around EMR is something that Bobby Kennedy went to D.C. with as part of his agenda. All you have to do is just look at the body of work from Secretary Kennedy, over the past 5-10 years. This is something he's been paying very close attention to. Doctor, where can people go to find out more about this, find out more about your work?
Well, they could go to the article itself, which was published by CRC Press. CRC is Chemical Rubber Company. And you might ask me, why is Chemical Rubber Company in the business of publishing science? Well, you might not know, but CRC was the internet before there was an internet. This editor compiled scientific data for scientists before we had an internet. And if you ever worked in a lab, you've seen many of their very thick books that were used by scientists all over the world. And it was one of my dreams to publish with this editor because of their historical importance in supporting science.
That's excellent. And people can find the link to that in the show notes. And what is your own website, Doctor, where people could find out more besides just that published article?
Well, it's In Vitro Plus. I don't remember it by heart, but I believe you will have that available as well.
I think we have it up on the screen now. invitroplusnet.wordpress.com. Dr. Paul Héroux, thank you so much for joining us today and for going over this. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our audience with or to convey to them before we wrap up this segment?
Well, we want to make America healthy again. And the reason for that is that if America is healthy again, the world will follow America's example.
Amen to that. That is fantastic. Dr. Héroux, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we're going to have you on again as science and political developments move forward in this very new dynamic area that you're exposing. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Michael.
Excellent. Don't go anywhere, people. As always, we are going to end today with another People Study story. Let's show that.
My name is Amy McNeil.
Okay, and so what made you decide to get a COVID shot?
You know, it felt like the best way to move forward. It felt like what everyone was needing to do so that we could get past this whole pandemic. I was a teacher at the time and felt like other teachers were getting it, and honestly I wanted to protect myself, I wanted to protect others, and just felt like I should go and do it.
And so you took one Pfizer shot?
Correct. I took one Pfizer on March 30th of 2021. At the time of the injection, I actually bled quite a bit, and the nurse giving the shot asked me, "Do you usually bleed this much during injections?" And I said no, and for the next few days I just had excruciating arm pain to where I couldn't even sleep. And I ended up going to an urgent care, and I said, "I have this arm pain from the COVID vaccine, and my whole arm's now going numb." And he said, "Well, you should try a neurologist. They must have hit a nerve." And so I ended up booking a neurologist, but during that time, the numbness started traveling around my whole body. So my limbs, my arms, legs, even up to my jaw started going numb and tingling, and I just felt like I couldn't even feel my extremities. And then made it to the neurologist, and he said, "Well, I think you might have Guillain-Barré." I had never heard of that before. He said, "Oh, maybe you have Guillain-Barré from the shot." And he had somewhat believed me about it. So he did, an EMG to check my nerves, and it turned out it was normal. But shortly after, even more symptoms just started to pop up, and just every day it was a new symptom. And because he had believed me initially, I went back to him and I said, now my heart is racing and I'm getting this pain in my chest, and I feel like there's an elephant, sitting on my chest, and I feel like I can't breathe, and I'm getting winded going upstairs, and so my limbs are numb and my heart is going crazy. And he said, well, we need to get you to the cardiologist right away. This is not in my realm. And so I went to the cardiologist, because I said I had the COVID vaccine and I'm getting strange heart pains and my heart's fluttering and it's racing, and I've never, ever had a problem before. And the cardiologist said, well, everyone in my office got the Pfizer vaccine and we're all fine. So I can't imagine that you would have had an issue from this. It can't be the vaccine. And obviously from that moment, I knew it probably wasn't going to be much help. But I got, heart monitor, I got chest x-rays, I got all sorts of things. And
I've got a few pictures of you.
This is when I ended up shortly after that in the ER, after seeing the cardiologist. This is when I ended up in the ER. And I went to the ER and said, I am suffering, I'm in pain, I can't feel my arms and legs, my heart hurts. And the ER doctor said, well, you must be, we're getting a lot of psychosomatic cases, and there's no possibility that this could be from a vaccine. And I said, well, it is, and I've had this cascade of symptoms since I got this shot. And he basically, dismissed me and said, I'll give you some pain pills and you can go. And so from that point on, I saw almost every specialist possible, because I thought maybe a rheumatologist could help me. They're used to autoimmune. Maybe my immune system is having a reaction. Same response from the rheumatologist, that this can't possibly be from the vaccine. You must have had COVID. And he tested me for ever having COVID, and it was negative. I had never had COVID. And I told him, I said this was from the vaccine, and he again just offered me something to numb my nerves and said, I can't really do anything for you. There's nothing wrong with you. So I was floating between different specialists, including eye doctors, because my vision started going blurry. I was seeing spots in my eyes. I couldn't look into the sun or be outside because my eyes would hurt so bad. So I saw an ophthalmologist. You're totally fine. Maybe your eyes are a little dry. And I said, no, I'm seeing spots and I've never had a problem with my eyes. So I went to different specialists, and I went to different primary, care physicians, family doctors that we knew. One especially was helpful and actually offered me and believed me and said he had heard that hydroxychloroquine was actually helping some people, and he actually prescribed that to me a few months later. And then I actually was referred by a friend to the doctor that I really credit with saving my life at this point. He was an integrative doctor, and he knew about vaccine injury. And he talked to me about all of my symptoms. And he said, I know what we need to do. And after that appointment, it was just this comfort in knowing that someone knew how to help me. So I started on vitamin C IVs and just natural supplements. And I remember what I told my family. I said I felt like pieces of my body were coming back to life, because I felt like every piece had been so broken. And it felt like finally, like my cells were getting something that they needed to heal. So since that point, I have, stuck to supplements and just tried to do clean eating, and really changed my entire world for myself and for my family. I'm a mom, and we've decided to homeschool our children because we've decided we will no longer get them vaccinated. because now we're awake to the dangers of what could happen and what has happened to me. And in that way, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I went through this, and that God just was with me through this whole ordeal, because I see the reason. I see now, because He's saving, my children, and then possibly even with me sharing my story, and even to friends and family in here today, that if even one person listened to, the dangers of vaccines, I would just ask you to look into it and to really research before you put something, that you're not sure about into your body. And so here today, I'm still left with symptoms that come and go. It's a strange flaring problem, so I have a lot of heart pain. There's a lot of nights, where I'll wake up in pain. I can no longer sleep on my left side because I'll feel crushing pain. And then I have twitches, muscle twitches, from that initial all my limbs going to sleep. So all day long, even though you might not see them, even right now as I'm talking, my legs are twitching. So they're constantly, my muscles are constantly spasming. And that hasn't stopped, now going into my 3-year anniversary of this. And obviously, I've come a long way, and some of the symptoms have disappeared, and I'm so thankful for that. But obviously I don't know the future, and so that's scary, but also I also feel that God is with me, and that whatever happens, I'm just going to rely on Him and what He has for my future. But that's where I am today.
Has this made you question all the vaccinations now?
Absolutely.
Would you ever take another vaccine again?
Never.
Finished,
Done. And my children, like I said, we will never vaccinate them, and obviously we're here in California, and children have to be vaccinated to go to school. There's really no way around it at this point, and my children are missing their Tdap booster, and so they cannot go to public or private school. So we're going to continue to homeschool them as long as needed. They're never going back because it is not worth risking their health, their life for that. So.
Well said. And is there anything else that you would like to add to this?
I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story, and if one person, listens and makes a different choice, that's totally worth it.
What amazes me is how many people sit on this sofa here being injured by a COVID shot and are now not going to take any vaccination. So really the dark side lose, because actually they've weirdly enough woken everybody up.
Right, that is exactly what happened to myself, my entire family, extended family, friends. That is exactly what happened. We saw what happened with the COVID vaccine and how many it has injured and hurt. And now we know what has truly been behind this plan, the childhood vaccination schedule, all of these things. We will never get another shot for any reason.
No. Thank you. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you so much.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.